So, we're here at SUGCON once more, and it's the 10th edition in Europe and the 20th globally. I mean, that's amazing. I've actually had the privilege to visit every single SUGCON Europe up until this point, and I hope I will still be able to visit this amazing conference for a lot of years to come. So, who am I? Well, I'm your narrator today, so forgive me. It's a user group conference. It's not symposium. So I'm Ivan, the janitor, Lieckens. We have an interesting new set of words that I would like to share with you at Sitecore. So everyone knows our logo, obviously, but the three new words that we're using at Sitecore, which I love to share, and I've heard some of the other presenters mention them as well. It's grit, integrity, and simplicity. And those are our core values moving forward. And when Dave announced this, I was a big fan immediately, so that's why I got that on my slide. So today's story is, I'm first going to talk a little bit of some characters of note that I'm going to introduce to you that are important when you talk about the game of publishing. Then we're going to go on a little bit of a history trip into the era of legend. We're going to pass by the Battle of Kos. We're then going to go and talk a little bit about the Edge publisher, first of his name. I'm going to introduce you to the Edge publisher, second of his name. And after that, we'll talk about the future of the realm. So, who's our characters of note? First character I want to introduce is Workflow. They always have the last word. And if you think about it, ask yourself, what is publishing if not a workflow? It's implicit because you don't really configure it. And everyone inside of Sitecore or dealing with Sitecore has a notion of publishing and what that looks like. But published or not is merely a state. Well, you could consider it that, and the sample workflow that I have up on screen here, which everyone should know, but which I find is not often used, is you have draft and approved or ready or whatever you want to call it. You can do stuff in between there, but I'm always a very big fan of at least having two states, whenever and wherever. And the main reason for that is that so that when you trigger publishing effectively, you're going to see that only the things that are ready are going to be going up. There's target, another character of note, and then is publishing restrictions and settings. Why is this one of note, you might ask, is by show of hands, how many people configure these? Oh, okay, so we do have people configuring these well. Good. So you have several restrictions, both from a date-time standpoint, from when to when something is valid, but you also have Boolean restrictions, just like, is this publishable or not? And when I go there, it's a little bit the question like, what's the difference between the workflow state and then this one? Things get complicated. Should we merge them? Worth thinking about. The target restrictions, are they still relevant, is one of the questions I have, especially when I'm thinking of XM Cloud. because in XM Cloud, we're going to be doing publishing to the edge, and that's about it. So if any one of you feels strongly about that, definitely come see me after the talk. So a little bit like the phrase, should they be replaced? But they're kind of the gatekeepers when you want to cross the bridge from being work in progress to going live. So let's go on a small history lesson. So we have the publishing dialogue. And I'm sure everyone's going to recognize this thing, or I hope you do. And the first part, obviously, is like, which mode do you want to be using? It's like your combat strategy. Like, what's the way you want to approach your publish? Some of the newer versions of our publishing dialogue, they have additional options and a refinement of your tactics as you move forward. So sub-items, relevant items, related items. And when you do site publishing, which is a nice one that Andy pointed out very recently as well, like incremental publishing, only available on site publishing, not on an item. I'm a big fan of incremental publishing. And obviously, you have your languages, which are your what banners you're calling on from your content to write to the live website. And then your targets are obviously where you're going to send them. So this is the setup that you do when you get ready for a publish. And it's very much been the same, because I don't know if you recognize the different versions here that are on screen from the publishing dialogue, but one of these, if I'm not mistaken, is the one from version 5 of Sitecore. So this has gone on for a long time and has been a long staple of the product. So what happens in platform DXP publishing, or used to happen, still happens today, but the general thing is you go from your master database to your web database. That's what publishing has been as a concept for many of you, all of us, that have been working with platform DXP. So what actually happens when you push that button? So first of all, there's going to be a root item per language that goes onto a queue. And then there's the first diversion where you've made a choice in your approach to your publish. It's like, is it incremental? Yeah, then we're just going to grab the incremental queue, and we're going to be using that one. And that will only include the changes from your incremental queue. That's why I like incremental publishing, because it means that only what your content editors have changed between point A and point B, which is the first time you published and the next time you published, that's going to be published. No other questions asked. So then we're going to process that queue. And what's the interesting point here is that if it's not an incremental publish, then there's going to be a whole lot that happens inside of there, which I'm going to zoom on in a second. And then after it's indexing, it's clear cache, and we're done. This is the standard Sitecore publishing that I hope every single one of you knows. But there's this piece that I want to zoom in on, which is this process queue. Because there's stuff in here that is worth talking about, because the queue, while it is actually being executed, it is filling itself. So it's as I said, like the stuff that's pushed onto the queue, if it's incremental, then we're all said and done. But if it's not incremental, then the only thing in there to start your publish is that route that you've chosen to publish, and that's the only thing that's there. So why do so many items then get published? That's because inside of here we have each candidate. So at start of the process, we actually only have a single candidate. And this candidate, we're going to determine the action for that candidate. And there's a lot of actions possible. We have delete target item, we have publish shared fields, we have publish version, skip, or restore target item. And I think most people actually have never heard of those names, because it's not something that people actively think about unless they're actually working inside of the publish pipelines, which is, as far as I'm aware, show of hands, who has ever changed the publish pipeline? Okay, so a couple of hands up that I was expecting, because we have a lot of people in the room that have a lot of experience in this area. Even for those, I think that the last one that I mentioned, the restore target item, is something that they might not have interacted with yet, because that one is actually specific to items as resources. And items as resources is fairly new, 10.1, so it's been around for a while, but not everyone has started using them yet. So items as resources, they also play into publishing and what to do when you determine that action. Now, after we've determined the action, and there's some additional steps if you start reading the config, I've chosen the most important ones here to get it on a single slide as well. We're just going to execute that. And after we execute the action for this candidate, then there's two very important questions we're asking. Like first, is this, are you using the child publishing? Is that active? If it is, then we're going to add all of those to the queue. And then the next question is like, are you publishing related items? Yes, then we're going to add all of those to the queue. Now all of a sudden our queue went from one single item maybe to 100, 500, 1,000. Hard to say. That can go very, very far. And especially, for one thing, there is this setting that I think also a lot of people are not aware of. It's called deep. That sounds a little bit weird, but that goes where that related stuff goes in, because if deep is active, it will keep going. So that's how this queue really starts filling up, because it starts looking at the item links of every single item that you just added to the queue, and then goes deeper and deeper and deeper until it has found everything that is actually related to this item you're publishing. Because if you're publishing the home node, eventually, if you would have ticked all the boxes, what you want is you want everything to be published. But in cases where you just want to have one single page with its data sources, then it should find and publish all of those. And sometimes you can get into a situation where more gets published than you were expecting. Just because items have relationships with each other sometimes in ways you don't expect, especially content editors can also sometimes move things around or push pieces to different places. So that's how we finally get to processing a single item, and then this just goes on and on and on until everything is out of the queue, and we're done. So deep, there's a lot of references that it tries to pick up. Clones are playing in here, for those of you using clones. aliases, templates, and links. And it's the links one that I think trips most people up, because it's the links that are inside of the link database. So it looks through all of those, and that's what it uses to find everything. And last but not least, it also adds, obviously, all of the parents of an item, because an item is not accessible if its parents are not inside, have not been published as well. So that's also something that sometimes can get tricky, because depending on where something is in the tree, all of its parents must be published as well. And that's also, if you don't set things up right, you might get more items than you were expecting needing to be published. So, small side story. Everyone's like, yeah, well, didn't we already go into a big improvement and all of that for our platform publishing? And I would say most definitely yes. So this is the publishing service for those who are familiar with it. It is basically a reimagining of publishing, but specifically for Platform DXP. And it only works for Platform DXP. The reason why it only works for Platform DXP is because it's very, very tightly coupled to the data system of Platform DXP. That is why this worked, and this was a great thing. But when we move forward, it's very hard to leverage it. So it was a first attempt at a new publishing. It was completely standalone. It was a separate service with a small module that introduced some of these screens that you're seeing and the change in process. And it was built for performance, which was great. And I think we can take a lot of lessons out of what we learned from building this and bring that into the new world, because it kind of got obscured after the Battle of Kaas. So let's talk about the Battle of Kaas. So when the Battle of Kaas was fought, what happened was you had the rise of Experience Edge. So we introduced the Experience Edge delivery platform, and it was ended on Content Hub. So then we figured out, like, hey, that's pretty darn amazing way to deliver content. Let's continue. So we brought it to Experience Manager. So we enabled you to start publishing from Experience Manager into the Experience Edge as well, enabling you to use that GraphQL interface you're all definitely loving, I hope. And then eventually, we kind of got into this story where Content Hub is publishing to Experience Edge, and Experience Manager is publishing to Experience Edge, and XM Cloud is also publishing to Experience Edge. And last but not least, Content Hub 1 is also publishing to Experience Edge. Now, all of these four systems, these four arrows that you see over there, all four have its own publisher. Two are extremely similar, obviously. So Experience Manager and XM Cloud have shared their publisher for a long time. And the only difference between those, obviously, is that for Experience Manager, for them to receive upgrades, you need to have a new version of platform. And for XM Cloud, it's actually a continuous update. So a lot of improvements continuously flow through into XM Cloud's publisher that then later get backported into XM Cloud, Experience Manager. So that's why XM Cloud always runs a little bit ahead of the XM Manager. but that doesn't, so those two, you could consider them to be the same, yet different. And then Content Hub and Content Hub 1, they each also have their own strategy publishing to Experience Edge. And there's one thing that I find really interesting about the strategies, well, the difference in strategies between the two XM-based products and the two Content Hub-based products. The Content Hub product, actually, you set up your, not templates, sorry, your entity definitions, which ones can be published and which ones can't. And then automatically by doing so, once that schema has been published, all of your changes that you're making inside of Content Hub that are cleared for publish, using those restrictions, fairly similar, not exactly the same, obviously, but fairly similar idea, they all just flow into the edge at any point in time. So, and Content Hub 1, they kind of took a similar, more similar approach to Experience Manager in XM Cloud, where you make the choice for an active publish. So we kind of have two publishing mechanisms going on here, where one is the active choice of publishing, and the other is by virtue of workflow, things that should be published are published. I think this is one of the big things that we're working on at Sitecore, like which of these two speaks the most and to people and what they're doing out there. So any opinions, please send them in to me. I will gladly listen and as we determine our path forward in that area. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit on our XM Cloud now and talk a little bit about the Edge publisher there, first of his name. So the first thing you need to know is it uses the same strategies. So the dialog you saw from Platform DXP still applies. That's still the same starting point. But there's another thing that I want to highlight, and this is a table that's out of our documentation. Not every publish is a publish. And what do I mean by that? We use the word publish in a lot of areas and in a lot of tools. So here you can see inside of the content editor, that's fairly straightforward and similar to what's going on in Platform DXP. Explorer, for those that have seen and used it, it has a few less areas where you can execute the publish and what that exactly does. There is, in the Pages editor, there's also a button to do publishing, and that has a set strategy that will execute. Like, you don't get the dialog with all of the choices, it has a set strategy. And we're also reconsidering that strategy. Like, what are the best options there? Should we give you that dialog? Should we do something else? Should we publish incremental? These are all ideas we're working on and which we would love your feedback on. And then there's the two later ones. There is a publish button in components, well, two for the styles and the Sitecore components, which is also a kind of publish, but it's not a publish. So same word, different processes, different effects, and I hope that when we go through some of this in the future, we might make it a little bit more clear that these are different processes, because I've had some people being confused, like, oh, if I press this button, does it all of a sudden start publishing all of the components on all of my websites, so it will publish those pages, and what happens with the content? So when you get questions like that, it's always a little bit tough, and that's like, choosing icons is hard, but choosing words to put on a button, equally hard. because it sets expectations, and sadly, often people have already concepts that they're familiar with. Like when you're coming out of the platform DXP world, you're thinking of the publishing process. But people that have never worked with that and are net new, they might think like, oh, they would have to look up what that exactly does. So different sets of expectations, which I hope clarification and improvements can definitely be done on. And then the last one, deploy actually also has a publish button, apparently. So, and that one does multiple websites all at once, which is cool, because when you're rolling something out, that's exactly what you might need. It's a very handy button to just go, boom, go, everything. But again, it's like a publish operation. Some people don't know what to expect when they push that button. So another thing I took out of our docs, this is how our documentation represents publishing to Edge. I was thinking this is a little bit too simple. So I'm going to jump back to the flow that I showed you, and we're going to enhance this a little bit, because this is how the Edge publisher functions. So actually, before we can start processing the queue, we need to publish a schema now, because the Edge is a data store that forms around your information architecture schema, and it needs to know about that schema so that it can offer it in a GraphQL way. So if you want more information on like what that looks like and how you can work with that interface, I highly recommend, there's a great talk from Alistair from SUGCON Australia, where he goes really deep into what that Edge schema looks like, how you can use it, how you can query things. Great talk. So after we've published the schema, then we can start processing our queue, because then we can start sending stuff up onto the Edge. And then we're done, right? Right? No, actually, not really. So that is one thing that trips up most people, I believe, when they're doing an Edge publish. They think effectively that they're done. But actually, we're only at point 1. We've just done the content management server publishing up to Edge. And inside of Edge, we actually also need to do some publishing and processing before that is ready. Because Edge is a geo-distributed system that makes your content available worldwide at high speed. So there's a lot of complexity in that area. I'm not going to go into the details of the infrastructure, but all of that still needs to process as well before we can actually get to clearing our caches. And after those, you actually start receiving webhooks. So this is also why you might have seen some talks from Sitecore saying if you want to do cache revalidation and stuff like that, when you're doing deployments with Vercel and headless, you should listen to the webhooks to know when they're ready to go, and then clear your caches on that side and then move on. So that's a whole area where your content editors might think like, oh, I've done my publish, because the publish dialog actually closes after that step 1. That dialog is done, and content editors might think like, oh, we're done, publishing is done. I should go and look on the website. But there can be a time difference between that and the actual receival of the webhook. That can be 5 minutes, that can be 10 minutes. Depending on how huge your database is, that can take up to an hour. So something to be aware of, and then we're done. So let's go into second of his name. And this is the handiwork of some of our XM Cloud architects. And he's sitting right here. Charlie isn't here, sadly, but they've done a great job thinking up some new stuff that we're going to be doing. So we're going to have this available in early access next week. We're going to enable you to self-activate the next version if you're on XM Cloud. And you can jump back and forth between version 1 and version 2. So you can test it out. See if it works for you. Because we're solving very specific publishing cases to speed them up in orders of magnitude, but they're for very specific use cases. So if that use case is not for you, then you might better still wait on V1 until we've gone through everything of V2. We're doing a lot of performance testing on it right now. I'm receiving numbers day by day, basically. To give you an idea on what we're seeing is, if you compare a publish operation 1-to-1, we're seeing about a 10% improvement right now. And for the specific cases that I was mentioning, and that is the case when you have big related item structures. So this is the use case which I think some of my friends at SUGCON have pointed out really clearly to me, is a nightmare. And that's when you have a footer or you have a header that is on every single page. Now, what happens if you publish that today? It basically is the same effect as static site generation. You have to go and generate every single page in your website. So when you run that publish operation, that's going to take an hour, 2 hours, 20 hours. Depends how many pages you have and how complex they are and how big your site is. So that's why we're doing an optimization in data source publishing. And to make that happen, we're going to split layout and data. And when we split layout and data, what we can do is we can keep all of the data sources separate and recombine them on the edge. So this is going to take a small hit to your delivery, but it's going to speed up your publishing by the order of magnitude of the volume of pages, basically. Which means that if you have a header, you're changing the header, you have 20,000 pages, where before that it would take 20,000 items to publish. All of a sudden, you're only publishing one item anymore. I would say that's a big improvement.
Can you give some numbers as an example? In our tests, publishing 10,000 pages.
What was it?
It goes down from
yeah, it goes down.
16 hours to 25 seconds.
Yeah,
something like that. Yeah.
So we're reassembling at the edge. So we're reassembling at the edge. We're doing no changes to the API or schema. So for everyone, it should not even matter to your implementations. This is just going to be an improvement that you get when you activate V2. So we'll have a clear documentation on how to activate it, because there is one important thing. After you activate it, you need to do a full republish, and then you can start using V2. And if you go back to V1, then you again have to do a full republish. So be aware that is the cost of switching from one system to the other, because it actually changes the way we store data at the edge. All right. So where are we going next? I think this is pretty exciting, and that's why I have to put this slide up for a second. Everything I'm going to be talking about now is subject to ongoing evaluation and subject to change. So, unification or divergence. This is a topic we've been discussing very much. Like, do we bring the edge more together for all of the different products, or do we want to diversify the edge for our products, and what that means for publishing as a process? That is a big question that we've been asking ourselves. We're also thinking the return of publishing service, kind of. Not more as being a standalone thing that you can actually look at. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a little bit of the UIs that we're thinking of in the next set of slides. But we're really thinking about observability of publishing and giving you more and more insight into what's going on. Because if I did not explain you this whole data flow diagram, how would you know what was going on in your publish? There's no visualization of it anywhere. If a publish goes wrong, there's not a lot of tooling you can use to determine what has happened. There's a lot of holes there, and there's a lot of black magic happening as well, especially when that dialog closes. You basically pray to the edge gods that your content is going to go live at some point. So we definitely want to give you the insights that you need to understand what's going on and why it's going on. And this is my ultimate dream, basically. Remove publishing. Like, why are we running publishing manually? The system should be smart about this. I'm a firm believer that workflows is the right way to go. That is how you should manage your content editing process. So if you don't agree with that, come see me and tell me why, because I really want to hear your reasoning on this, and I want to go into a discussion with all of you on how we can make publishing better and easier for all of us. And I think the easiest something can be is if you don't have to do it. So this is some of the mock-ups out of our design team. And what we're looking at here is basically what we're planning to give you and show you. This is the queue interface, where you can actually see like what's going on in my system in terms of publishing. And the old publishing service kind of had a screen like this. And it's awesome because today, if you want to see what publishing jobs are queued, there's this old admin page that shows you all of the jobs in Sitecore that you can go and try and figure out things from. But it's not that insightful, sadly. So we want to bring a proper UI to that, show you like what's going on, which edge tenants, how long certain things take. There's a lot of ideas on this slide, I can tell you that. And when you dig into a publish, like what has actually happened to that publish? Like what items got published? And some of these might be a little bit of dream state as well, because as I told you, like currently the queue fills itself while it's executing, so giving you the full overview of what's going to be published can be hard. But we'll think of something. That's why this is future looking. And Andy and all of the architect team of XM Cloud is going to do their darnest best to get publishing into a much, much better shape in the future. So, questions? The forever question. As soon as possible.
I know the panelists are going to ask me, so thank you. Top of everybody's mind.
Yeah.
With the consolidation of the data, do you want to provide querying over all data sources at once? So from Content Hub and XM Cloud and combine that in one query?
That would be pretty darn amazing if we could get to that state. Right now, as you've seen, we have 4 different publishers, well, 3 different publishers if you look at pure code, but we also have 3 different schemas that are being used. So going across schemas right now is not supported, but if we would figure out a way to do it, then we will definitely do so.
And provide custom endpoints as well to include your own schemas? So you can push your own data in there as well?
That's a different thing entirely.
That's
something we're future-facing looking into as well.
Would be cool.
That's beyond the realm of publishing. So
Thanks.
Hi. Not really a question, but I would say you need both. So the auto-publishing and the manual publishing, especially auto-publishing, I think we're using this since 12 years, 15 years, that incremental publishing, of course. But sometimes you have the case that you need to publish item directly. For example, if you have a bulk import and disable events, so if you have no events which stores in the event table, then you cannot do it without directly publishing, because incremental publishing only use the data from the events table, as long as I remember.
that's a very technical detail, which I would hope that we can solve some of that, because we're going to be changing so many things that doesn't matter anymore. So there's a specific reason you're getting into that situation, and I hope that situation simply won't exist anymore where we're going.
It depends, of course, how you do your data structure in Sitecore. So if you have a lot of data and want to import it, you can disable events and do it fast, or enable events and then you have a long time running job.
Yeah, so my thing with imports is always like, why are you importing something? Because I take care of a lot of integrations and Sitecore Connect as well, so imports is definitely also an area that I'm interested in. But when you're talking about importing data, you're already kind of setting an issue. That means that data is not ready to be consumed from its origin, which would be your preferable way in a headless world. You would prefer to grab that data at the edge rather than like shoving it into your CMS and then publishing it up to the edge and then consuming it from there.
Yeah, if the publisher to the experience edge, yes.
Yeah, there.
The way to get it to the experience edge is importing it.
So that depends whether your source. So that depends whether your source system is actually capable of global delivery and high availability and all of those things, and you want to use the edge to basically achieve that for that data. Then yeah, there's stuff to be said in that area. And I think that's going to flow more into what we're thinking about, bringing your own data. So, but that is a much, much bigger topic than just publishing. So.
Thank you.
All right.